Mr. Evans has to do. So, anyway, tonight's program is Russ Evans and his story about him being in Pearl Harbor when it was bombed, and his recollections of what happened when he was a young boy. So please welcome Russ.
What was this kid doing in Hawaii on Pearl Harbor Day? Well, the short answer revolves around a box of Kellogg's Corn Flakes. Going back a little further, 1891, the Bremerton Navy Yard was opened. 10 years later, they changed the name in 1901, became Navy Yard Puget Sound. And about that time, they realized that this Navy Yard didn't have much in the way of protection. Puget Sound was wide open, the Straits of Juan de Fuca were wide open. How can we protect our naval base? From the military thinking at that time, the Army stepped forward, said, we have some new equipment, some very latest. It was a disappearing gun. So these guns would come up into a firing position and then lower down to be reloaded. They came in 6, 10, and 12-inch diameter missiles, and they decided that they would protect the Straits of Juan de Fuca by a triangulation of 3 Army bases, Fort Casey, Fort Worden, and Fort Flagler. That they all had a good shot at the Straits of Juan de Fuca. And they became a triangle of fire. Each fort was equipped with somewhere in the area of 25 or 30 of these disappearing guns. They were never fired in a war situation, but they definitely were fired. My dad was in the Army at that time, the Army Coast Artillery, and he was stationed at Fort Casey on one of these guns. And he was the person that made the final settings on directing the firing of these guns. Was always pretty deaf in the left ear. These were huge things. They're all gone today. However, if you go up to Fort Casey, the same guns were used in the Philippines, and they brought at least 1 or 2 of them back and mounted them back at Fort Casey. And you can see them today. Well, Dad, in 1921 in January, was promoted to corporal. He was 16 years old. He was 15 when he went into the Army. Don't know how he did it, but he did. In 22, he was transferred. He was transferred to Fort Kamehameha in Hawaii, which is located. The fort's located within the city of Honolulu. He was still in the Coast Artillery, and this time their guns were mounted on rail cars. Now, Oahu had a rail system, not very limited, or very limited, was only a 36-inch gauge, but nevertheless, these disappearing guns, disappearing guns were mounted on the rail car. This was a picture taken in 24 in a place called Nanakuli, which is on the coast of Oahu, rather isolated, but how they could fire these on, there had to be an engine up in here someplace, and a rail car, but this is how these disappearing guns were mounted in Hawaii. I found another picture of my dad at that time. I'm sure he's in the picture, but I don't know where. I couldn't find him. My mother, in the meantime, was born in Coopville on Whidbey Island, finished high school, went on to Bellingham Normal School, which is today Western Washington. In 2 years of college, you were presented a teaching certificate. And she ended up, a few years later, teaching in Lacey. And as usual in the summertime, teachers would put together a pretty nice vacation, and my mother decided to travel to Hawaii. And I don't know quite how my folks met, but they did. Within 3 days, Dad had proposed. Mother boxed up an engagement ring she was wearing, sent it back to some guy, I don't know who he was. But they were married for 71 years. Now, getting out of the Army seemed to be the thing to do at that time. And you could buy out of your gig, your hitch in the Army at that time. The best I can recall, Dad paid $175 to get out of the Army. One requirement was that you had to go to a job. You had to have a job lined up. And he found a job on the big island of Hawaii on a sugar plantation. His job was the scale master. He weighed incoming cars of cane. My mother, in turn, taught school. Just a little side street. Sugarcane, when it took about 1.5 years to get ready to harvest, and they would burn the fields and get rid of all the greens, just nothing but the stalks were left. It created a tremendous amount of pollution, but that didn't seem to be a problem in those days. Then all the cane was hand harvested, one stalk at a time, and in turn was carried over to, again, a railroad. Now these were narrow gauge tracks that were portable. They would lay them out in the field, run these little engines out there, load up the cars, and in turn haul them into the mill. Well, this teaching and my dad at the sugar plantation lasted probably about 1 year. They were ready to turn around and head for Seattle. So about 27, they were back in Seattle. And the first job that he found was up on the top of Queen Anne Hill in a very small grocery store called Skaggs, S-K-A-G-G-S. It was a gentleman from Idaho that had started a grocery, cash only, small profit margin, and he was growing very rapidly. And Dad was just an employee of the store, but about this time, Skaggs was merging with Safeway. Safeway was just getting well started. He was offered a promotion in California, and so the folks left to work basically on the Safeway end at that time. Well, I was on the way. Mother had morning sickness, she was homesick, and I don't think they finished a year, but they returned to Seattle. Asked for his job back, and the store said, "Young man, you've had your opportunity." So he finally got a job at a final assembly plant for the Ford Motor Company. This building is still standing, Fairview and Valley, about a block from Mohi, Lake Union, and I think it's a storage. But Dad's job was upholstering what he called jump seats. These were probably Model T's, maybe A's, I'm not sure. But it was the front seat that you would flop down and then flop the whole thing forward so that you could get in the back seat. That lasted for a while. The recession had begun, and he was offered a job with Kellogg's as a salesman in the Seattle area. And Rice Krispies, Pep, Crumbles, cornflakes, bran flakes, and this weird product called Cafe Hag. It was very likely the first attempt at decaffeinated coffee. It was originated in Germany. There were 4 partners. One of them's last name was K-A-F-F-E. And the other 3, one name started with H, one with A, and one with G. And that's how they got Cafe Hag. As I remember, it was kind of a vile tasting sort of thing. Well, I came along in 1929 at Providence Hospital. Today, Providence is Swedish Cherry Hill, and I'm sure you've all read the publicity on that hospital and their problems. The Great Recession began the same year. He was with Kellogg through the 30s, and in 1937, Kellogg at that time had a representative in Hawaii. And this man pocketed a bunch of Kellogg money and totally disappeared. So Kellogg in Seattle knew that folks had been in Hawaii, and the word got back to Battle Creek. And he was called back to Battle Creek and offered a huge promotion. His job would be to call on all the retail, all the wholesale, the military, and he would host Kellogg executives traveling from Battle Creek to their plant in Sydney, Australia. So this was an opportunity not to be passed up. We traveled to San Francisco and boarded a Matson liner, the Lure Lane. At this time, this was the way you got to Hawaii. Was by ship. And the 2 ships servicing Hawaii from Matson was the Lure Lane and the Matsonian. On Tuesday morning, the ship, one of the 2 would arrive. On Friday noon, it would depart with a big send-off, the Royal Hawaiian Band, banners back and forth between the dock and the ship. At the same time, Matson had 2 other ships, the Monterey and the Mariposa, that traveled the South Pacific. And they also controlled virtually all the freight business in the Pacific. 2 things were fascinating me as an 8-year-old on the Lure Lane. And they both had to do with the dining room. The dining room would only seat half the number of passengers. So you had a first sitting and a second sitting. And what would happen up and down the hallway, and they'd yell out, first sitting, first sitting. Well, something I never forgot. By the way, just about the same time, or a little bit earlier maybe, this is what you heard on the radio. I'm sure you remember that. Every hour, and these little dinner chimes, there was one in every radio studio for NBC. They did it by hand, and oftentimes on the half hour. Anyway, the other thing on the dining room, the waiter would come around, we were handed a full menu every meal. And you could pick out whatever you wanted, your starters, your entrees, your desserts, your vegetables, your drinks, the whole business. And this waiter would just listen, go to the next person, and get the whole order, all the way around the table, come back and set every plate exactly what it belonged. To me, it was totally fascinating as to how he could not write a thing down. The other way to get to Hawaii, and it was just getting started. Pan American was opening up the Pacific. They were already well established to Europe and South America. But the Pacific was a huge challenge. They had two clippers that were used prior to Boeing entering the picture. But Boeing, here in Seattle, built 12 of these Boeing clippers. 9 of them Pan American purchased. They had a 77-pound luggage limit, and both passenger and baggage were weighed. A loaded clipper can only travel 155 miles an hour. Honolulu to San Francisco was 19 hours. Well, opening the Pacific was a big job because of the distance, and these planes just could only go just so far. So they had to establish a base on Midway and Wake and Guam and on to Manila and on to Macau, Hong Kong, and Sydney. They had to establish, they were all overnight stops. They had to put together fuel, they had to have a place for their passengers, but slowly they opened the Pacific. It took 6 days to go from San Francisco to Hong Kong. The round trip was $1,368. The plane could seat 74 people, max. 36 bunks for sleeping. There was thick carpeting, there was soft lighting, comfortable upholstered chairs. Life aboard was really pretty nice. There were numerous lounge areas. There were no seats like we have today, no seat belts. 4 stewards served 5- and 6-course meals on tables, linen tablecloths, genuine silverware, authentic chinaware. It was a long trip, but it was pretty nice. These planes during World War II went into military service, but Pan American crews stayed with the planes. Roosevelt traveled to Casablanca on his conference on a Boeing Clipper. Now, we often met these Kellogg executives coming and going And I can remember, oh, you're way ahead of me here. We often met executives coming and going. Starting the engines was a frightening thing to watch. Flames shot out the back and smoke, and it would slowly, one at a time, get each engine roaring. It was terribly loud when it flew over the city. Do you have the flight deck again? This flight deck on a Boeing Clipper was 21 feet long, was 9 feet wide with full headroom. The navigator took several celestial sightings on each trip and worked from his own 7-foot table. It was one of the most luxurious flight decks ever made. This next slide is an arrival picture. Very simple facilities, as you can see. In Honolulu, the Clippers took off from what was known as a lagoon, which was, I think, way over in the corner of Pearl Harbor was a little area that was cut off that gave these planes enough room to land and take off. By the end of World War II, these two planes were totally obsolete. One Clipper had flown in excess of 1 million miles when they were retired. Well, we arrived in Hawaii in 1938. I was in 3rd grade. And at the time, Honolulu school system was a dual system. They had English standard schools, and they had Pidgin English standard schools. This was true with primary schools, junior high, and high schools. It was a double system all the way. It doesn't exist that way anymore. It's changed to English standard only. The Pidgin English was derived from bringing in people from China, the Philippines, Korea, and even Portugal to work in the sugar industry and the pineapple industry. There weren't enough people. And with the different languages, communication was a big problem. And out of that developed a kind of a slang, but it enveloped Hawaiian words, English words, Filipino words, whatever they could work out. And Pidgin is basically slang as I see it, although today the two official languages of Hawaii are English and Hawaiian. However, the third, it runs real close, is Pidgin English. And I'll try to get through this little ditty that I found. It's from the book of Mark, chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. And it goes, that time, Jesus come from Nazareth town, Galilee side, and John would baptize him inside the Jordan River. Right then, Jesus would come up out of the water, and you know what? Jesus, when see the sky broke open, and when saw God's Spirit coming down on top of him, to like one dove, and wow, had one voice from the sky would say, you my boy, I really get love and aloha to you, and I say good inside because of you. Well, that's the best I can do. This is basically an interpretation of the Bible verse, but when it gets down to conversational, this disappears. It's far worse than this. Well, each year, in the summers of 1940 and 41, I would spend days with Dad calling on the military. On the Army bases, he would seek out the mess sergeants. In the Navy, the chief commissary officers. He was urging the stocking of more Kellogg products. He also distributed packets of recipes that the company provided based on cooking for large quantities. And I remember most the Navy trips to Pearl Harbor. It was nothing to start on an aircraft carrier, and I was on the Enterprise. We would walk from ship to ship, side by side, battleships, heavy and light cruisers, destroyers, submarines. It was a real experience. Now, at the same time, I learned to swim in the downtown Honolulu YMCA, not Waikiki. The YMCA program encompassed a 2-week youth camp at a very remote site on Oahu, and it was donated by the Dillingham family. Where's my little red light? Just when you don't want it to not work. Anyway, you can see that it was located right on Kayana Point. It was very undeveloped. It was one old bumpy dirt road that got you down to the camp. There were no roads beyond the camp. However, the railroad did go around Kayana Point and clear up to the top to Kahuku, and it was servicing the sugar mills. The site was donated by the Dillingham family to the YMCA, and it became a summer camp. We have the beach picture. It had a beautiful beach. It had lots of play area. There were about 6 cabins, 8 or 10 boys to a cabin with a leader for each one. There was a central building, a dining and auditorium, and one executive cottage. And Camp Urban was just 10 or 12 years old at that time. My father, as a surprise, rented the Camp Urban Executive Cottage for the December 7th weekend, along with another family. Sunday morning, Dad was up early, getting breakfast started. It was a wood stove, and there was definitely white smoke coming out of the chimney. He asked me to step out the back and cut a little more kindling, a little more wood for the stove. Just about the time I got out the back door and started, I could hear a plane, and the next thing I heard was what sounded like somebody threw a bunch of rocks on the roof. It didn't roll off. And I peeked around the side of the house, and right at that time, the trigger was pulled again, and these bullets landed about 20 feet away, hitting the sand. Little puffs of sand would come up. I went running in the house. I said, Dad, somebody's shooting at us. Well, it was 7:45. The first bombs at Pearl Harbor were 7:55. I assumed in my own mind later that this had to be a zero. It was not a big husky sounding bomber sound at all. It was just a single plane. You're ahead of me here. There's another view of the important landmark of Kayana Point this was a turning point for the planes heading off of the carriers. Next one, okay. The next one is that there were two separate attacks. The first attack came around on your left and concentrated primarily on Pearl Harbor. The second one was more of Pearl Harbor, the Air Force, Hickam Field, Schofield Barracks, strafing and bombing. The entire two attacks lasted 1 hour and 15 minutes. We often think of Pearl Harbor as being bombed in planes and carriers. But there's more to the story. The 6 carriers left November the 26th, and they traveled the North Pacific for 11 days without detection. There were 353 planes on the carriers, roughly 60 planes each, which meant that about 30 in each wave from each carrier. But the rest of the story, this was an invasion fleet. There were 6 carriers, 2 battleships, 2 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, 11 destroyers, 35 submarines, and 8 oiler service vessels. 65 vessels in this maneuver of theirs, in the attack of Hawaii. This is a picture of taken on the carrier on the 7th. The first plane is the Nakajima B-6N. Of the 353, 40 of them they were torpedo bombers. And they were the most destructive of all in terms of sinking the ships in Pearl Harbor. Many of our ships were just lined up side by side. And it was a piece of cake these planes, the Nakajima, could fly 300 miles an hour. They were 36 feet long, 49-foot wingspan, and they carried 1 1,800-pound torpedo with a crew of 3. They had a pilot, navigator bombardier, a radio operator, and a gunman. They took the same Nakajima, took off the torpedo holding device, and fitted it with conventional bomb racks that could carry many smaller bombs. There were 103. They called them level bombers. Then there were 131 Aichi dive bombers, a pilot and a gunner, 33 feet long, 47 wingspan. They had 2 forward-firing machine guns and 1 machine gun in the rear cockpit. 1 550-pound bomb under the fuselage, 230-pound bombs under each wing. This plane during World War II sank more Allied warships than any Axis aircraft, despite being obsolete in 1941. On these ships were 79 Mitsubishi Zeros. Our best fighter plane was the Curtiss P-36, and some of them did get up and engage in combat. The Zero could easily outdive, outturn, and outrun the P-36. Studying these planes, I realized the mistake I made in assuming that a Zero had fired on us at Camp Erdman. There was no way to fire at 90 degrees from a Zero that was traveling right along the beach. It had to be one of the bombers that was equipped with 2 and 3 people. Well, we packed up that day. I started for home about 4 in the afternoon, down this little old dirt road. About a quarter of a mile down, we were encountered by a soldier standing in the middle of the road, armed. "Who are you? Where did you come from? Where are you going?" Well, we passed muster. The highway took us right by Pearl Harbor. Huge mountains of smoke were still burning on the water surface, basically from oil that had leaked from these sunken ships. It's important to mention 2 things at this time. There were 3 U.S. carriers on maneuvers at sea on the 7th, and they were all saved. In addition, the invasion force completely bypassed the huge fuel tanks at Pearl Harbor, and they were left untouched. 2 things that Japan did not destroy. Before continuing our December 7th story, another big diversion. Hawaii consisted of 8 islands, and we're all familiar with Kauai, Oahu, Maui, and the big island of Hawaii, and less familiar with Molokai. Molokai is the one that had the leper colony years and years ago. Lanai was one of the smaller islands. It was the wedding site for Bill and Melinda Gates. They practically took over the whole island. The other small one in this little cluster was Kaho'olawe. It was used as a bomb site during World War II. There are no inhabitants living on the island today. And now comes the most westerly island of Ni'ihau, and its 2 chapters. It was off the coast of Kauai, not only 18 miles away. So I want to back up a little bit, take you down a side street. This is the island of Ni'ihau story. And it begins with Elizabeth McHutchinson. She was born in 1800 in Glasgow, Scotland. The family was well off. They were farmers and ranchers. Well, Elizabeth married a sea captain when she was 24, Francis Sinclair. By 1840, they had 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. And I'm not quite sure why, but the family decided to sail for New Zealand in 1840. They located a safe harbor on the west side of the South Island called Pigeon Bay, very close to Christchurch. The family developed a large plantation and a large cattle ranch, were hardworking, frugal, and were doing very well. The father and the oldest son set sail for Wellington, which was about 225 miles away, located on the tip of the North Island, loaded with produce, and for some reason, all the family cash. Terrible weather often occurs in the Cook Strait between the 2 islands. The ship went down, both of them were lost at sea. In the meantime, the family was growing. The kids had married. They needed more land. The adults and the kids now totaled 13. One daughter, Helen, married Charles Robinson. Remember that name. Elizabeth and family sold everything to go search for new land. It was now 1863, Elizabeth was 63, and they set sail from New Zealand to Victoria, BC. And all they saw was land covered with trees, and this wouldn't do for farming. They proceeded on to California in a sailing boat. They didn't find the land they had hoped for, but somebody suggested Hawaii. So again on a sailing vessel, they headed for Hawaii. And they loaded on board 1 sheep and 1 cow. Why the ones, I don't know. They loaded hay, grain, chickens, books, clothing, and a grand piano. They landed on Kauai. They bought land for farming. They were very successful, but they were still in search of more land. And someone suggested Niihau, 18 miles from Kauai. They really liked the island and they wished to buy it. And all the islands of Hawaii at this time were now under the rule of a single king, which years before each island had a king. They made an offer to King Kalakaua IV for $6,000 to purchase the island. The king countered with $10,000, and it was accepted. Shortly thereafter, the king died. The year was 1864. The king's brother, King Kalakaua V, completed the purchase, delivered title upon payment of $10,000, and Mrs. Sinclair handed the king $10,000 in gold. Don't know where she found it. The king had one request, that the 600 or so Hawaiian residents living on Niihau be treated with respect and allowed to continue their lifestyle without interference. And that request is honored today after 163 years. Today it is owned by the same family, the two Robinson brothers, descendants of the daughter who married Robinson in New Zealand. In 1915, the family decided on a strict no visitors to the island policy, and it became known as the Forbidden Island. No electricity, no water supply, no firearms, one congregational church where the pastor solved all the island disputes. Today they have limited electricity with solar panels, water is collected from rooftops into storage barrels. There is a small Navy base on one end of the island, which is a major employer for the 160 residents today. The residents for many years made beautiful and expensive leis from shells they collected from the beach as their primary source of income, along with the sale of cattle. Now, that establishes the Niihau story. Now the Niihau incident. The carrier pilots were instructed to land on Niihau if they were unable to get back to their carrier. They were told that there were no inhabitants on the island and that within a day or so a submarine would pick them up. Well, two planes in the second attack were both damaged, and they started for their carriers, knew they couldn't make it, turned back to Niihau. And one pilot could see the island coming up and signaled to the second pilot, and the second pilot shook his head and said, "No, I'm going to go back and do as much damage as I can." And within minutes, that second plane goes straight into the ocean and was gone. Well, the other plane proceeded to circle the island looking for a place to land. And it was losing fuel, been shot in the fuel tanks. And it did land, crash landed in a pasture. And not very far away was a big Hawaiian fellow. Went up, helped him out of the plane, and picked up his pistol and papers that were in the cockpit. He took him home. His wife served him breakfast. Later in the day, they treated him to a luau. Well, there were two Japanese families living on the island along with the Hawaiians. One man was a beekeeper, and he was called to interpret, talk to the pilot. The pilot told him of the attack, and whatever else he told him, this one Japanese fellow, he was nonplussed. The few words that he repeated to the Hawaiians did not include anything about the attack. Next day they called the second Japanese man to interpret, who also said nothing of the attack. And these two non-disclosure conversations ended up costing the U.S. dearly. An official naval report to Washington in January of 1942 told of these Japanese interpreters, this was the determining influence for President Roosevelt to enact the evacuation of all Japanese from the West Coast. Loyalty to the U.S. by these two non-disclosure people made it questionable as to their loyalty. Approximately the 12th and the 13th, the pilot was still around. They'd had a number of confrontations. The word was out of Pearl Harbor. Things were not going well. The pilot wanted his papers back, and they wouldn't give them back. He also wanted his pistol. And those days in between didn't go well at all. Well, finally one day he secured his pistol. He shot a big Hawaiian, Ben Kanahele. Shot him 3 times in the groin, the stomach, and the upper leg. And Kanahele picked up the pilot. He threw him against a stone wall. And his wife picked up a big rock and started bashing his head. Kanahele then pulled out a knife, cut him in the throat. He was later awarded the Medal of Merit and the Purple Heart. But the final part of the Niihau story is quite short. In Hashihama, Japan, home of the 22-year-old pilot, there is a granite column erected in his honor, and this is what it says. Having expended every effort, he achieved the greatest honor of all by dying a soldier's death in battle, destroying both himself and his beloved plane. His notorious deed will live forever. That was still standing in Japan. Back to Sunday on our way home. On the radio, the announcement had come through with quite a few announcements, but one of them was that they didn't know what was going to happen next, but they feared they would contaminate our water supply. And they asked everyone to fill their pots and pans full of water. When we got home, our neighbor had our house gate, and yes, the pots and pans were all full of water. The same day, Sunday, martial law was declared, which means that, your in-place politicians running in the city continued. But the government, if they issued an order, it superseded everything. There was a total blackout from that day forward. The schools were closed. And the next day, Monday, my folks said, well, you can go out and play, but stay on our property. So after about a few days, my first time to leave the house was to go down to the Honolulu YWCA and help clean out the basement for an air raid shelter. Cornflakes by that time were rather unimportant. The Japanese families were asked to bring in their shortwave radios, and Dad for a short time was hired to receive, label, and store these shortwave radios. Didn't last for just a very short time. Dad's next job was with the Federal Surplus Commodity Corporation. They were involved in storing a 6-month food storage in Hawaii, including animal feed. And Dad was put in charge of securing warehouses. And he could just about commandeer whatever he wanted. The school where I was in grade school had a really nice freestanding auditorium. They took all the seats out, laid down dunnage, and it was soon filled with rice. And this is not a picture of the school, but it shows just about what was going on. Well, rice was in gunny sacks, and the sewers had developed holes. And the picture is not of rice, but I had, for a very short time, a job of sewing up the holes in these leaky bags. Well, everybody needs an office. And there was nothing better than the only royal palace in the U.S. They immediately emptied out all the furnishings in the throne room, and Dad's desk was placed in the throne room. In early '42, everyone was fingerprinted and issued an ID certificate. We were all issued gas masks with instructions to carry them at all times. We were encouraged to build your own air raid shelter. Well, this one was not ours, but it looked like this. It was just a big hole in the ground, covered over with wooden planks and dirt piled on top. Never used, a lot of work. Well, school was out on the 5th, normal Friday. Didn't get back until it was either late March or early April. I was going to a private boys' school at the time with all men teachers. And at the time school was ready to go again, the men had either gone into the service or into defense work. And the school scouted around and found a bunch of retired teachers. And they were all women, and they got the school back going again. School, by the way, was Iolani. It's still in existence. It's down close to Waikiki, and it's highly regarded, right along with Punahou, in terms of the caliber of graduates. Well, our teacher, because we had these gas masks right with us, she'd pick up a yardstick and whack it on the desk and yell gas. And she wanted everybody to get the mask on, fitted in 20 seconds. And for the most part, we complied. Then on the grounds of the school was a building about the size of a one-car garage. And they set up in this building some kind of a tear gas. And you had to take the whole class out, and you'd march into this little building. And if your gas mask was leaking, you were back out the door lickety split. But that's how we knew the thing was working right. Well, our decision was made to return to Seattle in 1942. We were given 36 hours notice for evacuation to get on the ship. And we missed our first call. In the meantime, we had to have everything ready to go. Bedding, kitchen thingamajigs, clothes, everything. Well, it turned out that our neighbor was in the funeral business, and all caskets coming to Hawaii were shipped in wooden crates. So our living room was lined up with either 3 or 4 casket crates and containing everything. We finally got the word, and we were put aboard a freighter, not a very, kind of like the Liberty ships that came later in the war. These ships were all converted for troop carriers. Down in the hold, they had hammocks that went from the floor to the ceiling. And you'd lie down, put your hand like this, and the next hammock was right there. We had the usual food line, tin plates, and after about a day and so with this, Dad said that's enough. Well, freighters at that time, and still today I guess, usually had 12 staterooms, and they had converted these staterooms to hold from 2 people, probably at least 6. My mother and my sister were in one of these cabins. Dad and I were down in the hold. That wasn't going to work. Now, Dad paid somebody about $20, and all of a sudden, we were up on deck. We could use the facility in the cabin, and we were told that up in the forward hold there was a huge supply of wool blankets. So we packed a whole bunch of them, built a kind of a mattress on the deck, and a whole bunch on top of us, and that was, we slept outside at night. As we got closer and closer to the west coast, it got colder and colder, and more blankets. The ships, every 15 minutes, night and day, would change course by blowing a whistle. It never stopped, all the way to the coast. There were 4 ships in our convoy and 2 destroyers. We were at sea at Christmas in 1942. Back in Seattle, I finished the 8th grade at Hamilton Middle School in the Wallingford district. In the meantime, Dad bought a grocery store at Queen Anne and Mercer. It's about 1 block from the foot of the Queen Anne counterbalance, if you remember. And by the way, the mechanism for the counterbalance system is still in the street at Queen Anne and Roy. And I've read where there's a possibility of a new attraction similar to Seattle Underground, visiting the room and this equipment. Possible. Well, food stamps were what we used at this time during the war years. And you had blue stamps and red stamps and green stamps. And Dad would bring home a great big bag full of these stamps. And we'd sit around the table, sort them and count them because they had to be banked in order for the wholesale house to release more groceries. Now, this counting procedure went on for a while until Dad said there's got to be a better way. So he weighed out roughly 1,000, 3 or 4 different times. He went next door to the druggist, weighed on a scale that was very accurate, and presented the food stamp authorities. This is a bag of 1,000 stamps, and they accepted it. From that point on, we didn't have to count these things anymore. Well, theaters at this time always showed double features. You had a comedy, you had a newsreel, and the Movie-Tone News provided excellent war coverage. All during 44, 5, 6, 7, I was in high school, graduated from Lincoln in 1947. This is Lincoln, probably early on. The school was built in 1907. It doesn't look quite like this, there's trees everywhere. The family then made a decision in '47 to return to Hawaii. He sold the grocery store that he had, and he opened Kapilani Supermarket in Honolulu. It was not huge, but it was the first supermarket in Honolulu. I attended the University of Hawaii to the '47-48 school year, and then applied for transfer to the UW. I left Hawaii in the summer of 1948, 3 years at the UW. And that brings me to the last page. If there are any questions, I'll be very happy to make a try. About 3 or 4 months ago, there was a meeting following the art show, and one of the ladies who had help with the art show and I sat down at the same table, and this lady said, "Why don't we get the story now?" And I said, "Well, my kids have been after me forever." Oh, sorry. Anyway, I'd like to recognize Mara Bowman, who helped me get the first transcript down. Mara, where are you? Thank you so much, Mara.
Thank you, Russ. It was lots of fun.
It only took me 75 years.
Well, and you really took it to another level. It's really amazing.
And the second thank you to my wife, who helped put all the graphics together to fine-tune the story. I hope you enjoy it. Any questions?
Why do you tell me you didn't go back to Seattle? The grocery store that you ran.
Say it again.
The grocery store that you ran in Seattle.
Yes.
Your blood apparently.
Started back before I was born, actually, the first store. But the one that he had during the war was Queen Anne Mercer.
But did you have one?
Oh, this was much, much later.
Right. Well, you stayed in the grocery business.
I have, yes. Any questions? A couple of gentlemen here in the front row that were at Pearl Harbor. Nice to have you both. Appreciate it. Yes?
Russ, after you came to Seattle to go to UW, did you ever live in Hawaii again, or did you stay put?
After high school, or after I left to attend the UW, my folks returned to Hawaii. They probably lived a good 60 years in Hawaii. That was home. Yes.
You know, Russ, I just thought I just wanted to mention something that I found very interesting when we sat down, and I don't know if you mentioned it, but because of how the Japanese Americans were treated on the West Coast, I was really curious to find out how they were treated in Honolulu after the bombing. And could you speak a little bit about that, because it was kind of...
Somehow or other I've missed this point. Where did I miss this?
I don't know, because you did talk about it. Go ahead.
Were they sent, they weren't sent away. I remember you just talking about how it was your friends who were Japanese, you still went to school with them, that they
I'm trying to recall the incident. It seems to me that the loyalty of these two interpreters influenced Franklin Roosevelt, to the point where he wasn't sure of loyalty to the U.S. And he put together the evacuation of Japanese on the West Coast as a result of these two interpreters on Niihau.
But what happened to the Japanese in Hawaii?
As near as I can tell, it was just an impossible situation. They were pretty well isolated, a couple thousand miles away. They were completely overlooked. There were nothing like the evacuation in Hawaii, no.
I talked to a guy that was a kid in Hawaii, also, he's Japanese. And it's surprising to me how the soldiers gave him candy and things like that. And they were the ones that were bombed. And yet they didn't have any animosity toward the locals. Whereas we didn't have any problems over here. And they hated them.
You say they were bombed in Honolulu?
Yeah, during the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Right.
The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, but the Japanese locals were prejudiced against them. They didn't feel any prejudice.
I know there was very, very little in the way of bombs that hit civilian areas. Very, very little. And yes, the population was about a third Japanese at that time, and a third white, and a third mixture. And I never heard anything about evacuation for Hawaii.
I was born just after the war started, and the stories that I heard was Walter Dillingham, James Burns, and several of those men stood up and said, "You cannot take all the Japanese. Our economy will fail." So they took school principals, priests, newspaper editors, all the higher echelon, and the rest stayed back. But there were camps on Oahu and other places, and many were transferred to the mainland.
Well,
So
that's very interesting.
And more men and those their followers said, "No, you cannot take them all."
In all my research, I did not run across that incident, but I can see where it could have happened, yes.
Because Walter Dillingham had all that construction work that needed to be done
Well,
to repair and...
Dillingham is a big name in Hawaii, yeah.
They needed the labor in the fields also.
Yeah.
They had to have the food supply.
Food supply. But you know, those people were the influential leaders of Hawaii economic
Thank you all for coming. Much appreciated. Good. Thank you.
Please stay and have coffee and cookies until they're all gone.